Hey everybody. So ideally, I'd sort of be able to provide commentary along with the movie here. Unfortunately, I don't have that ability with Screencastify. I'll check in with Miss Dyer to see if that is if I have that ability. But you won't be able to hear the volume of the video, but you will be able to hear me. So instead of playing it all through all 53 minutes, I'll sort of jump around to spots that I think I should highlight. You might be able to hear the background a little bit in of the YouTube video itself, but it won't be as clear, obviously, as my voice. So I'll try to do the best I can. Um, but I assume you already watched this once, so you should be familiar with it. It is a pretty fascinating video, and like I said, many of the questions on the test that I'll give you on Wednesday will be based upon some of your thoughts and feelings and interpretations of this film. So it's a little bit confusing here because this Frontline PBS special is from, I believe, 1985. 1984 is when it's being shot. But most of what you'll see for the first 20 minutes is actually from 1970. So that's why the people that you see here who were in their um, early 20s, they're actually the same people who appear in the third grade classroom back in 1970. And there you hear it's the whole point of why Miss Elliot, Jane Elliott, the teacher, is doing this is to try to get the kids to understand what it might be like to be discriminated against. And because they live in a very homogeneous society, right, where every single person in Riceville, Iowa is white. The idea of discrimination based upon skin color is not something that they know. There might be some differences with regard to, economic standing in the town. But even so far as I've read some things about Miss Elliott before, and the fact that she was a Catholic in this town, which was almost all Protestant, sort of set her apart. So it is a society where people are not are very much the same, in which case to understand what it means to be discriminated against would be difficult. So she's trying to explain this to the kids, and obviously she informs them of the idea of blue eye, brown eye, that being the difference, and that the kids who are not as good at first, I forget which color goes first, I believe brown eyes are on the bottom at first, they have to wear these collars. So there's some questions about the influence of the collars as well. So you see, initially there's a little bit of pushback, right? That the kids are saying, "No, that's not true." But because she's a figure of authority, Miss Elliott is able to sort of instill it in them, and it takes pretty quickly. Notice how poor Lori, when she was slow to turn to the page in her book, I believe, immediately the kids are the ones who say she's a brown eye, right? It's not the teacher. Now, she sort of laid the groundwork, but so quickly the kids are able to. The reason why Lori wasn't able to turn to the page as quickly as other ones is because she has brown eyes. Whereas the day before or the week before, where the kids have thought that Lori's eye color was the reason why she was slower turning to the page? Of course not. And it's not even like this is something that Lori regularly does. This just might be, she her finger slipped on the page, and or she was daydreaming, something like that. This part was again a little bit shocking. This is all happening this one morning. Whereas with the teacher, Mrs. Elliott, can't find her yardstick, so one of the students suggests that she should keep it close at hand in case the brown-eyed kids get out of control. And then obviously the inference there is that she would hit the students with the yardstick. So Again, it's the kids who are suggesting this. So it doesn't take much prompting for them to um, treat their treat their fellow classmates who have brown eyes differently. Another example of she asks who's going to go to lunch first, and the kids all say the blue-eyed people. And then she asks, "Well, why is that?" And then the kids are the ones who supply the reasons why. And I think she kind of settles on, they'll take too much, or whatever their poor behavior might be. So after lunch and after recess, right, there was a fight on the playground, and the little blonde-haired kid punched Russell, the kid with the glasses, with the tape on the corners, in the stomach. And they're saying he catches himself. It's like, well, they were calling us brown eyes, and they always call us brown eyes. Well, obviously, this isn't something they always do. And then so the teacher sort of puts Russell on the spot. Well, why would you call him brown eyes? It's not like yesterday or last week or last month you would have used that as an insult, as a pejorative. So why would you now? And then I think John is his name, the one who punched him in the gut, as he says. He explains that well, he doesn't feel any better. This kid always makes me laugh because he seems to be I'm not sure his first name, but he seems to be the first one to sort of put it together. And so when the next day arrives and she explains that it's actually the roles are going to be reversed, he just says, "Oh boy!" But he was also the one to piece it together, like, well, how people are discriminating because of eye color. Well, that same thing happens in society because of skin color. So here we have Brian, and he's somebody who shows up a lot. He's the one whose dad had kicked him to explain how brown-eyed people are not as good on the first day, and he's the one who is being singled out for not being able to sit. He also has quite the scene at the end when they're allowed to tear up their collars, and he's is one of the adults in the second part. Brown-eyed people. Now, this is where the educational component comes in, right? Because on one day, the kids who are wearing the collars do a worse job on, I guess, some sort of, I'm not sure if it's math facts or times tables or something like that. Sorry, motorcycle just went by. But then on the next day when the roles are reversed, right, kids either do better or they do worse, but they seem to follow whether or not they're wearing their collars. And the kids sort of talk about that. Now, granted, they're in third grade, so they can't necessarily articulate it, but they do a pretty good job of, they were thinking first about their status in their little classroom society as opposed to, what they could or could not do academically. And then right here, the teacher sort of has a wrap up. And I mean, I was watching this, I've seen this probably over the years four times every year. I've seen it 20, 30 times. I was watching it with my wife the other night just to sort of make some notes and form my questions that I wanted for the test. And she just exclaimed what a great teacher she was. And that's true. I mean, after 2 days, um, this is a lesson, and you have those lessons, right? You guys probably remember some when you were in first grade or fifth grade or seventh grade, lessons that you'll never forget, that teachers do. And this is definitely one that she has instilled in them. So she has the wrap up conversation. If you skip ahead to, it's kind of in like this video is kind of in four sections. So you have the initial section with the kids. The next section after that, I'll just jump ahead as Miss Elliott speaks a little bit. So this next section, I'm not going to go into too much detail on, and there won't be a whole lot of questions regarding it, but it's the kids who are now in their early 20s as they reflect back upon that experience and how they still valued that lesson, and then some of their spouses are involved as well. But as I said, that's not really a part that I'm going to focus on too much. I'm going to jump ahead though, and this part's not very long. It's 27 minutes. I wrote down some timestamps here. um, So this next part is not very long, but I think it's pretty eye-opening. So they go to Greenhaven State Prison, which is actually not too far from where I went to college. The professor here is from Dutchess County Community College, which was just down the road from the college I went to in New York. And just to see, um, I know for me, this definitely broke some stereotypes about what I would consider a person in prison to be. Sometimes we have different stereotypes about how people must act and how people must talk. But just to hear the level of reflection and introspection that the prisoners have, based upon um, them watching the same video that you did, that you just did from 1970, I think is quite eye opening. So that's a key point, and one of the questions we'll talk about that, and I mentioned it earlier on, is the idea of, you know, um, because the teacher has this authority over the students when they're 8, 9, 10 years old, that has a near immediate impact on these students. And you could say, like, well, that must diminish as you get older, and I'm sure it does, right? I'm sure that the teacher's influence on a 9-year-old is greater than it is on a 14-year-old, is greater than it is on an 18-year-old. Although I do think that it kind of can depend upon the teacher, right? I'm sure that I had college professors that had more of an impact on me than perhaps teachers I had in junior and high school. And I'm sure that I had some really good teachers in sixth grade, and maybe they had more of an impact on me than teachers had in fourth grade. Um, but that's the point that this gentleman's bringing up. So, and I know you can't hear it, although hopefully, again, you've already watched the video. But he talks about how the idea of prejudice, it's something that is built in your mind, right? It's a barrier in your mind. So I think for the idea that thinking one way, instead of it being seen as a pathway, it's actually being seen as an obstacle. And then the next guy who talks, he talks about how he identifies with, again, I think it's John, the blonde haired blue eyed kid, or no, I guess brown eyed kid. um, anyway, the blonde kid who punches the other one in the stomach during recess, and how that lashing out at anger, um, and how, in the long run it doesn't really do you any good. You might think it's going to alleviate the pain of being discriminated against, but in the long run you might end up being the loser for it. um, and then the last part of this, the fourth part, is the longest section, and it skips ahead to still back to Iowa in the mid 80s, and it is going to have people who work in the prison system. So it's going to have guards and wardens and secretaries and whatever else, whatever other jobs might need in a correctional facility. And they do essentially the same experiment that Miss Elliott did back in 1970. They're doing it in 1984, 1985, whenever it is, and they're doing it with adults, also with blue eyes and brown eyes, and they're also wearing the collars. They're wearing these sort of light green things. The ones to start off on the bottom with the adult experiment, and they don't switch it with the adult, so don't wait for that. The ones who start off on the bottom are the blue-eyed. So as you watch this part, that's what you should be noticing. So one of the things that you notice, it's not so much um, the authoritarian figure, the teacher, and it is Mrs. Elliot who is running it. Obviously, she's 15 years older, but just the adults on the outside with the blue eyes and the collars, them being made to wait, right? So they're adults, they're professionals, they show up where they need to be, and they're left waiting in the hallway for 20-25 minutes. And just that small gesture really sort of sets them on edge, that initial level of discrimination. And then once they are brought into the meeting room, they sit in the back. So one thing you'll notice, and you see Mrs. Elliot, um, she targets her focus on very few, right? I'm not sure how many blue-eyed people there are. Let's say there might be 40 in the room, but there's really only a couple who are targeted. And I think that's important to notice as well. It's there's a targeted focus, and you have to think, well, why is she only picking on somebody? Well, we actually talked about that a little bit, in this class. I forget the context, but when you like setting a precedent, right? The idea of like setting an example. I think we talked about that with like George Washington and the Whiskey Rebellion. That you don't have to kind of bring the hammer every time, but what you do have to keep in mind that if you, whatever consequence, how you behave the first time, that is going to carry you over. So she's not going to have to really sternly address all of these people. She's just going to have to do it to a couple. And then the other, you know, 37, 38, they're not going to want to feel her wrath. They're not going to want to have the spotlight shown on them. So therefore, they're going to fall in line. This guy's Roger. And I know maybe I shouldn't laugh at Roger, but he's just he gets badgered so much, and you feel for him. He's not prepared. I'm not sure if he was told to bring a pencil, but man, once she has her hooks into him, it's funny and awkward all at the same time. So this is another exchange that gets a little bit testy with this woman. I can't really Karen. It looks like her name's Karen. Sorry, I didn't. I never realized that before. Right? Am I seeing things? Uh, That's good. She's asking to see a manager. Just joking. Um, anyway, there's a whole thing about gum with Karen. There's a whole thing about names and birth certificates. They really have a back and forth. Um, but one of the things that you notice, and there's another gentleman who talks about this later, is that because the blue-eyed people are being seen as being hostile, as being argumentative, as being out of control, because of that, um, the very idea of them arguing against Mrs. Elliot reinforces the stereotype that has already been set. So if you are told that you act in this certain way, and then you want to speak up to argue against that, well, then you're just digging the hole deeper, right? You're reinforcing the stereotypes that have already been said. So this guy at the 4505 mark, he makes the connection to the Holocaust, where he talks about stormtroopers in Nazi Germany and people who are Jewish and things like that. Sorry, my daughter is screaming in the background here. She's fine, don't worry. But making that text to self connection, which I think is important. Now, it's not the same one that Miss Elliott had brought up when she was talking about, skin color and Martin Luther King and things like that. But he's sort of he's fitting it. He's using the message as he sees fit, making that connection. Uh, and right at this point, sorry, more motorcycles here. It's a beautiful day today. Um, at this point, he's explaining the idea that just the mere point of arguing helps reinforce the negative stereotypes that are placed upon the people wearing collars. Now, I actually thought that this point, and not to pick on poor Karen again, but she talks about how everybody has to deal with this, just by making it to adulthood. The idea of discrimination is something that everybody has to go through. And this younger woman, I'm not sure her name, but she basically counters what Karen has to say and says, "No, I don't think you do get it. Right? This was just a mere 90 minutes of your time where you were discriminated against. But the idea that there are people who as soon as you wake up, you may feel that way because of the way society has been built." So I thought that was just sort of an interesting back and forth that was had there. All right. Again, I know it's not exactly the smoothest commentary here, but hopefully that helped you identify some spots, and that might help with the questions that I asked. I think it's a great video. I think it's really important. I wish I was there to watch it with you and have that conversation. But if you have any questions about the unit vocabulary, this video, the questions that I asked, please keep in mind that the test is not due until next Tuesday, May 12th. So I will happily answer any questions that you have, especially about this video, because I really think it is a valuable educational tool, and hopefully you find the questions worthwhile. All right, folks, I will. Good luck with all those questions, and we'll sign off here.